Today's rundown is about the mystery world of the movie, The Boarding School Murders, 2024, a story of a middle-class foster teen who ends up in an elite boarding school, only to discover some dark secrets lying beneath the surfaces, forcing her to fight against a backdrop of danger and deceit. The film starts with the introduction of Frankie, one of the finest students of history in her class. She and her best friend Trina plan to go on shopping together, but Frankie denies because apparently Trina stole a bracelet from shopping mall, and they both were taken into custody for this stupid act. Frankie has applied for Limo boarding school in Switzerland, one of the most epic schools in the world from where top entrepreneurs and CEOs come. While sitting in their class, Frankie is astonished to see that she has been selected under the scholarship program, and Trina is so overwhelmed with joy that her laughter is bubbling forth uncontrollably in the class. While packing her stuff, Frankie sees her childhood picture with her father and throws it away because apparently she has a strained relationship with him due to his criminal record. Frankie expresses to Trina that Limo boarding school is only for great women and heads of states, and she believes that she is not good enough and doesn't belong in a place like that. Nevertheless, she and Trina think that she deserves this opportunity. Before leaving, Frankie reminds Trina about that incident where they were caught stealing a cheap plastic bracelet. Trina gives her the same bracelet as a parting gift, only this time she actually bought that bracelet for her. They promise to stay in touch with each other, and Frankie finally departs. When Frankie arrives at Limo boarding school, she is welcomed by the headmistress, Miss Ainsworth. She is a strict, rule-follower type of woman and is pretty straightforward with Frankie. Miss Ainsworth welcomes her and gives her a brief overview of the school while guiding her towards her room. On the way, Frankie is noticed by a rich girl, Tinsley, who exudes an air of excessive superiority over the newly admitted Frankie. Anyway, she eventually enters her new room and finds a rulebook about the school, but she simply ignores it. As Frankie is settling in, one sweet, straightforward but weird girl named Jacqueline suddenly enters her room and provides her with the school uniform because this prestigious school has no staff members to take care of the students. Jacqueline immediately befriends Frankie and helps her to settle in quickly. Jacqueline tells her about the discrimination, stating that the rich girls treat the poor ones poorly, and it seems that Jacqueline has also been a victim since she joined. When Frankie joins everyone during lunch, she soon understands that she will have to be very courageous to cope with the other students. Most of them come from the houses of billionaires, and Frankie comes from a very poor background. This class discrimination is pointed out on multiple occasions by Tinsley and her group. Amidst the show-off comes Tinsley with her rich friend Maria, flaunting their wealth and displaying an attitude of superiority, belittling Frankie for her financial situation. Frankie responds confidently to their argument. However, unbeknownst to her, sinister plans are brewing against Frankie. Later that night, Frankie and Jacqueline are hanging out in the garden and wasting our time with their useless talk. They see a mysterious masked figure looking at them from afar. Soon, the figure starts chasing them, and both the girls start running for their lives. However, Frankie sees that Tinsley and her squad are messing with them. Tinsley mentions the shoplifting incident and Frankie's father having a criminal record. Tinsley sort of starts blackmailing her, saying that if Frankie does not follow her rules, she will mention these to the school's principal. Frankie calls Trina the following morning and expresses her concerns about being insecure among these rich people. Jacqueline interrupts their call and consoles Frankie about the earlier encounter with Tinsley. Frankie tells her everything about her past, including the shoplifting incident, explaining that it was just a stupid mistake by her friend which led to them being taken into custody by the cops for just one day. Frankie also reveals that her father has been imprisoned in psychiatric hospitals and that she hasn't seen him for the last 12 years. Later at night, Frankie is about to sleep when someone screams in horror. Tinsley's dead body is found in the corridor of the hostel, casting a haunting layer of unease throughout the boarding school. The panic looms large as Tinsley's friend Maria starts doubting Frankie's motive behind the killing. Tinsley's body is taken away and a useless detective, Krauss, enters the scene and starts investigating the matter. The students are called for a meeting regarding the incident, and we are introduced to Mr. Limo, the dean and owner of the boarding school who lives off campus with his family. Before the thorough investigation, Jacqueline meets Frankie in the library and discusses about Tinsley's death. Frankie naturally believes that everyone is going to blame her for the incident, given the fact that she and Tinsley didn't hit it off. As the investigation begins, Maria confidently mentions Frankie's confirmed involvement in Tinsley's death. Maria also mentions Frankie's criminal record, aiming to cast suspicion on Frankie and make her a prime suspect. Volkov, another bully from Tinsley's group, also suspects Frankie to be the murderer but denies having witnessed anything herself. When confronted by Detective Krauss, Frankie directly tells him that they may have gotten off to a bad start, but this does not mean that she will kill someone because of being bullied. As far as her shoplifting incident is concerned, Frankie tells him that it was her friend Trina who stole the cheap plastic bracelet. Frankie just hit a guard as he was behaving badly with Trina. However, even though Detective Krause believes her, there are other students, including some teachers, who do not trust Frankie since she has a past history of shoplifting. Anyway, the rest of the lot does not know about the original incident, so they start to look at Frankie like she is already convicted of Tinsley's murder. The students also go through a counseling session in which Frankie behaves with a positive attitude. The counselor is eventually convinced that Frankie doesn't have any psychological problem and has nothing to do with Tinsley's death. After the counseling session, Frankie encounters Maria in the stairs, who talks in a threatening tone and rudely blames Frankie for the murder. Frankie later calls Trina and discusses the whole incident, expressing her belief that the murderer could be one of Tinsley's friends since everyone in the school hated her. In order to find some evidences, Frankie utilizes her lock-breaking skills and sneaks into Maria's room while still on call with Trina. She comes across an article about Miss Ainsworth in Maria's notebook and takes a picture of it. Maria suddenly arrives and takes 100 hours to open the door with the keys. However, Miss Ainsworth suddenly calls for a church meeting, forcing Maria to walk away. After that, Frankie finds Maria's tablet in the drawer and decides to leave with it for further investigation. She hides the tablet outside Maria's room and rushes to the church meeting. Mr. Limo reveals that high level of alcohol, along with tranquilizers, were found in Tinsley's blood. This points to the fact that Tinsley fell to her death and not murdered. However, Maria and Volkov rudely disagree with his claims, maintaining their belief that their friend was killed. After the meeting, Frankie secretly grabs Maria's tablet that she hid earlier and uses a duct tape to hide it behind her bathroom mirror. She then goes through the article she found in Maria's notebook, but is interrupted when someone slides a piece of paper in her room. Apparently, the message was from the murderer, who sent it to both Frankie and Jacqueline, containing a death threat. At the same time, Maria and Volkov confront them and start tormenting them by spitting in their food. This results in Frankie striking Maria in her face, and the four start fighting in front of everyone. Miss Ainsworth intervenes and orders all of them to visit her office. Maria is still adamant that she didn't do anything wrong, while Jacqueline blames them for those death threats. Nonetheless, Miss Ainsworth warns to expel all four of them if such despicable behavior is exhibited again. The girls once more go for lunch because there's nothing else to do at this school. Maria and Volkov once more interrupt them, but this time apologize for spitting in their food. Naturally, Frankie is surprised by their decency but somewhat accepts their apology. Later that night, Frankie finds it very hard to sleep, so she decides to walk in the corridor. Suddenly, she notices some disturbance outside in the garden and sees a mysterious masked figure playing with a dead body. Despite calling for help, she does the most sensible thing and rushes to the spot, only to discover Maria lying there unconscious. Now she finally screams for help and Maria is rushed to the hospital. She's still alive but in a coma. Frankie says that she saw someone pulling Maria's body from the window of the basement. Detective Krause doubts that Frankie may be lying since Maria continuously blamed Frankie for Tinsley's murder, and she also knew about Frankie's troubled past. Detective Krause has every reason to believe that Frankie is behind all of this, so he seizes Frankie's stuff, including her phone, for a thorough examination. Volkov later enters Frankie's room, expressing concerns about being scared since the murderer is apparently still at large. That night, Frankie takes the risk to talk to her friend Trina using the official computer. She picks the lock of the library and contacts Trina to explain something that she has found. Frankie tells Trina that she doubts Miss Ainsworth, as her appointment in the college somehow feels a bit dicey. A female detective suddenly enters the library for no reason and starts searching. Despite being too close to her and clearly flashing light on her face, the detective simply ignores her because she is blind. Anyway, Frankie and the two girls meet the next morning and discuss about the new creepy guard hired by the authorities to keep a watch. They go to Frankie's room where Frankie explains the idea of Miss Ainsworth's involvement in everything, but she still doesn't have clear evidences. Volkov devises a strategy to distract Miss Ainsworth with Jacqueline, giving Frankie a chance to sneak into her room and find anything helpful. According to the plan, Frankie goes inside Ainsworth's bedroom while Jacqueline and Volkov try to engage her in bizarre conversation. However, Volkov and Jacqueline are unable to distract Ainsworth for long, and she now plans to go to her bedroom while Frankie is still there. Unfortunately, Frankie does not find anything inside her room, and she almost gets caught during the process. Luckily, Miss Ainsworth only takes some medicines and leaves. The group later discusses their failure in finding any evidence. Miss Ainsworth suddenly makes an announcement and orders every student to return to their respective rooms for some reason. Detective Krause enters Frankie's room with a security guard, and she now believes that she might be in trouble. They are looking for the exact shoe they doubt the killer wore that night. Surprisingly, they find the shoe under Frankie's bed in her room. Frankie is now arrested as the prime suspect in one murder and another attempt at murder. The creepy guard keeps a watchful eye on her at night, ensuring she doesn't escape. The following morning, Frankie is released as she is being exonerated after they watched the security footage. This means that this useless detective didn't bother to watch the camera footage before arresting an innocent girl. Anyway, she goes straight to Maria in the hospital, who is still in a coma. She seeks her help because deep down, she believes Maria knows who the killer is. Anyway, she comes back to her room and calls Trina, explaining that she has no clue how she is being exonerated, but she is willing to find out everything as she opens Maria's tablet one more time. After spending some days watching adult videos on the internet, Frankie finally finds some interesting texts from Tinsley sent to Maria. The texts are from 2007, where Tinsley says that she has hired a private investigator who has come up with some significant information. We cut to a flashback where Tinsley can be seen blackmailing Mr. Limo, the dean of the school. He had an affair with Miss Ainsworth, who was recently appointed as the principal of the school. However, Mr. Limo paid her enough money to abandon her child and keep quiet about their extramarital relationship. The reason behind Tinsley blackmailing Mr. Limo was that she wanted to have good grades in her curriculum. In her family, she had been the black sheep, and she wanted to change that. Frankie now thinks that Mr. Limo is the killer, and so she and Volkov try to get the tablet to the useless detective. However, they suddenly hear Jacqueline screaming from the principal's office. When they enter, they find out that Jacqueline is holding a knife against Ainsworth's throat while Mr. Limo is trying to talk her out. It is finally revealed that Jacqueline is the daughter of Mr. Limo and Miss Ainsworth. Miss Ainsworth failed to leave her daughter in foster care, so she brought her to the school. Mr. Limo knew that Jacqueline would do anything to prove her worth to him, so he sought help in the Tinsley situation. Jacqueline thought that if she took care of Tinsley, her father, Mr. Limo, would very much appreciate her efforts and would love her the way she had always wanted. She also reveals that she had planned it so perfectly that even Frankie's admission was a part of her plan, so that, when the time comes, Jacqueline can put the blame on someone who already has a criminal record, which is Frankie. Jacqueline admits to killing Tinsley and attempting to murder Maria. However, even Maria would have been dead by now, but she somehow survived the attack. At the same time, we see that Volkov is secretly recording the whole confession on her phone. When Jacqueline notices her, she tries to attack her, but Frankie hits her with a nearby glass vase, taking control of the situation. Miss Ainsworth blames Mr. Limo for everything and decides to testify at his murder trial. 8 months later, Frankie is released from all the charges, and she is now Maria's best friend. Before leaving the school, Frankie discusses her future plans with Maria and decides to stay in touch with her through texts. At the end of the film, Frankie goes to the mental health hospital to reunite with her father. She now thinks that her father, no matter what kind of life he has lived, deserves a second chance.